Dick Cheney made money off the Iraq War. Hey gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, Talking About Club. Today we're going over battle rifles.
But first, what is a battle rifle? A battle rifle is a service rifle chambered to fire a fully powered cartridge. The term battle rifle is a retronym created largely out of a need to better differentiate the intermediate powered assault rifles from full powered rifles, as both classes of modern firearms have a similar appearance and share many of the same features such as detachable magazines, pistol grips, separate upper and lower receivers, etc. And yes, I read this all from Wikipedia.
Oh, that'd be really bad. No one's gonna know. They're gonna know. They're gonna know. No one's gonna know. So sometimes the problems with FALs that I've run into, keep in mind I'm no FAL expert, is that the mags can be rather finicky. Gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. I'm your host of Talking Thorax. Today we're going over a little thoughts and opinion piece on what it's like running a battle rifle. So essentially what this video is trying to accomplish is it's trying to give you a quick idea of what it's kind of like, unless you don't have any idea what it's like to run, you know, say a larger caliber rifle, or if you don't know what it's like running a 7.62x51 rifle at all. There are big differences when you run, you know, battle rifles such as these. Now, keep in mind though, we aren't including like say the AR-10, where I think the AR-10 or the AR-10 mechanically, the manual of arms for the AR-10 is very comfy and familiar to someone like me who spent a lot of time on the AR-15. These certain guns take a little bit of a learning curve and they need a little bit of adjustment and a little bit more training. But the big downside when you run 7.62 guns is that ammo right now, especially right now, is very expensive. So if you want to support the channel in any way, shape, or form, Patreon and buying merchandise is an excellent way because this video was expensive to make. Right now, it's pretty much like $1 a round for 7.62, give or take, right? So it's pretty pricey to run this bad boy. Real quick, we'll show off the comparison. It's really fun just to show this off because, you know, it's a good visual aid, but you got to see this is 5.56 and this is your 7.62x51. It's crazy to think about that, you know what I mean? You do see the stark differences, and you've started to see that transition, you know, for at least America was in Vietnam, right? So we had our boys hit Vietnam with their M14s, and then eventually those got phased out. They had their issues. They should have been using FALs, and there were accounts of the Australians, I want to say, and using their FALs in Vietnam. There's actually a good movie about that. I think it's the Australians. Yeah, it has the guy from Vikings. Really enjoy that one. Keep in mind, this is a pretty small platter of what we're working with compared to what a larger collection of weapons that you could have, right? So there's a lot of things that we're missing. We're missing an M14, we're missing a SCAR 17, which is a very good one. You know, you actually saw those being used a lot by high-speed guys in Afghanistan and Iraq, guys much higher speed than most of us will ever be. So that's a good example, you know, because they were having issues in Afghanistan of distance and the terrain, and they needed to reach out further to the bad guys. So that's a good example. Now, fitting with the nostalgia and the retro theme of my channel, you know, where I like to combine new gear and old gear, going with the FALs and a good old G3 for now isn't a bad choice. So real quick, we'll start with the G3. I ran this actually in another video. I'll link it right here, a little self-shilling, right? And it was actually not terrible to run. I ran a variety of ammo for that one. I was running some steel, some Tula 308, and then some other 308 rounds. It did okay. Some of them did have a hang up, and I do worry about it. But you know, G3 ultimately is not a bad gun. This one doesn't have the paddle release. This one doesn't have the paddle release, so that's kind of a bummer, but you can work around that with a little bit of training, right? I still got around it, and I'll still be able to do reloads. You just don't be retarded. A big upside about this gun is that the mags are very inexpensive. You can get these mags for super cheap. If you go to a local gun store that does Cerakote, they often use these mags as an example because they're so cheap. Like, abundance of these bad boys. They're very easy to come by, which is a big pro. As opposed to FAL mags, where FAL mags, from my experience, so keep in mind, is all, take everything I say with a grain of salt. I'm a dude on the internet wears a balaclava, so heed everything I say, do your own research. But from my experience with FAL mags, typically I ran into the issue of it's a hit or miss depending on what you're getting. So I'd probably just stick with whatever DS arm cell. If you're running like a DSA FAL, just stick with them. You'll probably be good to go. As far as this gun, this is a 16-inch configuration with a red dot, so it's a little bit more modern configuration. We'll touch on my personal FAL, even though that also has a video. Another link, I'll do a link. But this bad boy, a little bit more modern, it's just missing a weapon light. It's got the sling, it's got the 16-inch barrel, it's got the collapsible stock, which is pretty good and handy for if you're doing vehicle work and you're running a 308 gun, right? But when that stock is fully out, it is rather a large stock to get on the gun with. Take that with a grain of salt, probably notch it out and make your own little custom notches in this bad boy. It just depends how well it holds. I think my buddy tried to make some notches of his own. I just don't think it holds up too well. Yeah, it doesn't really lock too well. As far as muzzle velocity goes, I have a 16-inch with 7.62. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. Go Google it. So comparing this gun, the overall footprint compared to, say, my FAL, where this is just a retro abomination. This gun, if you're new to the channel, is an inspiration of like a modern day Rhodesian FAL, right? So it's got a Surefire 660, Halbach device, and then you got your grenade launcher sight, and then this is an Aimpoint Mark III, which was made in 1983. Surefire 660, I want to say, came out in the 90s. Halbach was, of course, older with the Rhodesians and Rhodesia. And then they have their grenade launcher sights. Of course, this isn't necessarily, it's not like a perfect historical weapon. It's just like an inspired by. This footprint is pretty large in comparison to, a 16-inch G3, right? So you literally have a 24-inch battle rifle, and then you have like something that starts to look and feel more modern. It's still pretty chonky, you still only get 20 rounds, but it's getting there. And then of course, we can hark back to the past and go really battle rifle, iconic FAL setup with the bipod. So when you play a lot of video games, you'll see a lot of times in Call of Duty or Battlefield, I want to say Call of Duty mainly, you'll see them with the bipod. So it's a good introductionary to a lot of younger kids getting into video games. They see FALs and they kind of recognize and start to grow fond of it. You know what I mean? This is a good example, I think, of that Cold War era. Countries were trying to equip their infantry soldiers with something a little bit next level. So they're getting out of the World War II era of weapons, getting into the more modern era, the 60s, getting into the more modern era of, say, like the getting out of the 50s into the 60s, right, when you start seeing troops getting equipped with FALs, and then the bipod comes out, right? So there's a good emphasis on marksmanship, placing your shots, reaching out to distance, you know what I mean? They weren't thinking of doing like 2-2-2-4 splits, like the high-speed stuff that came back from the global war on terror, as opposed to actually being good infantry fighting men. Well, it's funny when you try and like think of running this fast, like normal gun guy terms. It's very clunky. It's not going to be as high speedy as your 11.5, your 13.69 AR-15 setup. It's not going to be as fast. But what it is going to be very it's going to be very robust. It's literally a fighting rifle where you can take off and you're fighting the Argentinians in the Falklands, right? It's something different. It harks of a different era. This one has its carry handle. Mine doesn't have the carry handle because the Rhodesians chopped theirs off. They had like one guy that apparently, I think, a round ejected out, reflected off of that carry handle, and then hit him in the face and he lost the eye. So they're like, hey, we're bouncing out with the carry handles, which is fine because I think they usually carry it at the ready. But I mean, if you're humping over long distance and you want to carry your FAL, this isn't the worst way to go. So this one also has a wood stock and then the synthetic handguard, which is kind of like the opposite of the G3 over here, because the G3 has the wood handguards and the synthetic stock. So it's kind of fun, a little bit different. One thing you lose with these battle rifles is mag capacity. The standard issue mags are those 20 rounders, right? But they still, of course, do make 30 round mags, and they are freaking heckin' lords, right? You can see on my placard right here, I'm running 330 rounders to catch me up to modern day speed of having, what, 90 rounds on my carrier up here. The curved mag is a whole different aesthetic though. It's curved for your pleasure. There we go. And it looks proper. It looks something chonky and it looks pretty good. It is something to say, like, when you go to the flat range, you're not necessarily humping this kit around as long as you would be, say, if you were issued this kit. You aren't like, hey, guess what? You're gonna hump 12 miles to the flat range, you have to shoot. We had the luxury of driving up and shooting, so it's not like I'm getting as fatigued. So that's also a weird X factor and a nuance that you gotta think about. Of course, battle rifles in that heavier caliber, they do a good job of punching through shrubbery and you know, getting through and fighting the deflection of the rounds, right? Your 5.56 or smaller calibers, they're gonna get more affected by exterior circumstances. Big words, makes me sound smarter. But that's just the nature of the beast. So if you're trying to shoot through shrubbery, crazy it does sound, yeah, your rounds will get affected. Anything, you don't know what's gonna happen to your bullet if an outside substance affects it. It's like when you're shooting through a windshield, do you know where your round's gonna go? I don't know. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Whoa, that was probably as smart as I ever got on the channel. Holy crap. Now, of course, we do break things down here very big chimpy, and I try and keep it very simple because I, myself, am a simpleton. Dude, I can't get over how, that looks really good. That looks really solid. Dude, that's crazy. Now, of course, a little self-plug for Clone Father. They fit rather nicely into the HSP placard. I've been running 7.62 and then, of course, the 308 mags today. Been doing rather solid. No real issues. It is fun though. These guns do hit different, and there is a different level of connection to these guns that I think we have. Battle rifles are just, the big downside is if you have to pay for battle rifles out of your own pocket, that's gonna suck. Well, essentially, if you have to pay for anything in your own pocket, it kind of sucks, you know what I mean, but whatever. But especially battle rifles, because these are expensive, you know, I think my base gun, you're getting anywhere from 15 to 1700 for an FAL, depending on what you're getting. And then, you know, ammo, mags, it's all a lot more than what you could get into with an AR-15. Financially speaking, if I wouldn't necessarily recommend this to be someone's first gun if they're looking for a good self-defense fighting rifle. But I will say, if you do have the means and you do have the will, these guns are definitely, I think, a must-have in your collection. With that being said, like, I'm not trying to sell you an FAL for this episode. We're just having fun showing off. And the most important thing about these guns is that they look wicked cool. That's what you have to take into consideration, is that, hey, if you're not looking cool, well, what's the point of getting into guns? All right, gentlemen, hey, if you enjoy this video, feel free to like and subscribe, leave a comment in the comment section down below. As always, your comments are a sacrifice to the algorithm god, a god of which who has one fire on repeat. If you want to support the channel in any way, shape, or form, please. It always hurts my heart when I'm shooting off 308 rounds. The brass bunny that comes out and finds this is going to have a field day. But nonetheless, if you want to support the channel in any way, shape, or form, Patreon, merchandise, excellent ways to support the channel. As always, gentlemen, stay easy, stay breezy. I will catch you all on the flip.
Spin around and say something just ridiculous.